You have been listening to the governor of New York announcing just moments ago, approximately 15 minutes ago, that in 14 days he will no longer hold that post. It follows that stunning news conference a little more than a week ago from the state's African-American Attorney General, Letitia James, that 11 different women had come forward and said that he sexually harassed them. The governor saying he admitted that he offended all 11 of those women, pointing out that, yes, he was not accused of kissing them on the cheek, but grabbing their butts and also grabbing their breast. Perhaps the epitaph of the governor will be written up in one line, in which he says, "I just wasn't thinking." Dr. Laura, our chief legal analyst, is with us right now. And Dr. Laura, what was fascinating to me as I listened to the governor was that he admitted that he did something wrong, but then he didn't. So legally, is he off the hook, even though politically his career is that now bright light bulb that is dimmed?
You know, I would like to say legally he is off the hook, but Dale, I don't know who his people are, who his team are people, but he was so criminal in terms of his own statements, him saying things like, "It's a man's world," admitting to, "I don't recall touching the female trooper's stomach, but yes, I touch officer's stomach. I do this on a regular basis. It's my way of saying I see you." And so all of this supports these women's claims that this was a pattern and practice that he did. He touched people's stomachs. He kissed women. He hugged them. And what's so disconcerting to me about his entire announcement is the disconnect, the absolute disconnect, the fact that he doesn't realize these behaviors or won't acknowledge, not only are they offensive, it's unwanted touching, and any unwanted touching violates the law. That is sexual harassment. That is a classic case for sexual harassment. And what the governor needs to recognize is that poor judgment, Dale, has consequences, has legal consequences, and that's what he should get ready for.
Dr. Laura, we saw back-to-back news conferences this morning, one from his legal team saying that the foundation of the charges brought against him were flawed, and then we heard the governor say that I can no longer do this to the state of New York, and the political side of this argument. The political side has now been silenced. There will no longer be the impeachment. He will not be the second governor of New York to be impeached while in office, but he will go in a long list of governors who have had to resign. That being said, do you believe that they are now fighting a two-pronged strategy that is now merged into only one prong, and that is making sure that he does not get sued? Because here's the interesting part about it. On the criminal side, isn't every charge he faces a misdemeanor?
It is. It's just a misdemeanor in the state of New York, only up to 1 year in prison and possibly up to 3 years of probation. So they're all very minor, this forcible touching based on the statutes there in New York. And I do agree that the strategy now is to keep him from getting sued. I wouldn't be surprised if he settles out of court with a lot of these women, essentially just to make it go away.
Dr. Laura, did what we just see, was that the end of his political career, or was that the beginning of his political comeback, recognizing that this battle is lost? The Assembly Speaker saying that they were moving forward with the articles of impeachment. It was estimated that by mid-September he probably would have been removed from office. He lost the support of the entire Democratic delegation, the House Speaker, the Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi, as well as the congressional delegation. So did we see the end of his political career, or was this the beginning of his political comeback?
You know, if we were anywhere but America, Dale, I would say he's done. But one thing about the United States is often called the land of redemption. We've seen politicians come back from huge scandals, sexual scandals, and win again. And so I think that he's not going to give up. I think he's going to make a run at some point for the presidency. And I think that this is just a new strategy, a new pathway that he sees himself to the presidency. But Cuomo's far from done. He loves the limelight. He loves being a politician. As we know from his former father, it is in his blood. So this is far from over in terms of his political ambitions and pursuits.
Two questions before I let you go. And as I was listening to the governor, I first thought, why didn't he do that the first time? When he held that news conference and he showed all of the photographs and he said, look, I hugged people and I kissed people and I pinched them on the cheeks. And basically a lot of people were saying you were doing a full Italian defense, and even Italians were upset with the way he did that. If he had done what he did today, weeks ago, without resigning, do you think that they would have been calling for his resignation? I know that's a political question to ask you, but from a legal standpoint, contrition goes a long way.
It does. I think had he come that way in the beginning, as opposed to attacking the victims and trying to justify his behavior, if he had just had a spirit of accountability and said, you know what, I did do these things. They were offensive. I was wrong. Give me a chance to redeem myself. As he said to his daughters, he wants them to remember that he made mistakes. He apologized for them, a sense of atonement. It would have been very different. But I think strategically, he just made some wrong moves from the beginning in terms of how he responded to these initial allegations. And that's going to make his political climb even higher because, again, we're in the midst of the Me Too movement, and there's just the Harvey Weinsteins. It's just a lot of dismay, and people just are tired of this. They're tired of, as he said in his own words, this being a man's world, and that this type of behavior, women are simply supposed to accept it because that's the way things are.
You know who else was accused of doing what he did? The former president of the United States, by 23 different women. And there is now emerging a narrative with regards to sexual harassment and sexual assault that, depending on which side of the political aisle you're on, you either resign or you tough it out. That being said, how is America now supposed to move forward in the Me Too movement when there are two different strategies to deal with accusers?
I think what's so important from this case, and the lesson that can be learned, is the importance of continuing in terms of the Me Too movement to encourage victims to speak out, to encourage people to have the courage to go public. Because when you put this type of behavior in the public sphere, under the public scrutiny, you tend to have at least one of those outcomes, which hopefully it is what we saw today, a resignation. But it's so important that women keep speaking out, because we have to change this from being a man's world to a fair world, a sexual harassment-free world, and we can only do that by encouraging victims to tell their stories.
Dr. Laura, our chief legal analyst here at BNC. Doctor, as always, thanks for being with us. Once again, if you're just tuning in, New York's mayor announcing just moments ago that he will be stepping down as the governor of New York in 14 days, turning over the duties to the lieutenant governor. He was facing a landslide of criticism both inside the state and also on Capitol Hill in Washington, where the entire congressional delegation, and including the president of the United States, had come out and said that it was time for him to do so. In his news conference, it was long. He basically said that he kissed people, he hugged people, but he didn't believe that he did anything wrong. Summed up perhaps in these words, "I just wasn't thinking." Again, the governor of New York announcing moments ago that he will leave his office in 14 days. And on another note, we've been tracking that infrastructure bill, that $1.2 trillion piece of legislation coming out of Capitol Hill. It passed 69-30, a part of the Biden administration's Build Back Better program, one step toward bipartisanship. D.C. Today is now a half an hour into BNC Live. Tashani Whitlow is up next. I'm Dale Walters in Washington. Thanks for being with us. I'll see you tomorrow.